welcome back to another devlog. This is week 88. Um, Kind of an interesting week this week. So basically, got past last week. Last week was kind of a tough week. I finally cleared the way to working on the HK snake here, and just bring him up. Vector root dev. So I got the snake to the point where his grab of the player was looking pretty good. The point was on, everything was polished up, the actual animation was working, the blood spraying. I got to the point where it's like, okay, now it's time for, after the snake bites you, you can't really play like a fainting animation. That won't really work. So I needed some sort of like ragdoll to go limp, and fall to the ground, right? That would be the ideal animation for this situation. So I was kind of like, okay, how do I do a ragdoll? And what you can do, you can build yourself a basic ragdoll rig, but it's a lot of work to set that up, and it's going to be a very basic thing, and that's okay. But I was looking around the Unity Asset Store, and I found this nice little package that basically it pretty much like expedites the setup of like the setup of a ragdoll rig. It takes all your bones and it kind of makes all the colliders and stuff for the physics, and so you don't have to sit here and it does a lot of nice things, like it does all the physics weights and all that. So it really expedites setting up a nice a nice ragdoll rig for your characters, because there's a lot more to it than just setting up a few colliders and stuff. But and then you can do a lot of fine tuning adjustments. All I needed it for was like a falling ragdoll, but you can actually use it for if you wanted like an in-game runtime ragdoll, like get hit by physical objects and stuff, to respond alongside your animations. But that's another story. I just wanted to set it up for falling. So while I was doing that, I found a bunch of other That's the same company that makes the procedural animation for the tail. So I was like, okay, why not? I'll go ahead and buy that. It's like $20 a package or whatever. So I was getting to that stage where I needed to do a ragdoll for this character, and I was getting in there, and I was kind of like, and then I don't know, I got sidetracked or something. I was like, watching these videos, like reviewing the package that I bought, trying to figure out how to set up the ragdoll, and it was kind of getting into like bones and stuff and like IK stuff, and it's just like at that point I was like, I kind of got a little sidetracked, where I was like, oh, maybe if let's go to the armature. So I was like, maybe I should take another look at my yeah. It's just like I kind of got distracted because my aiming IK was all broken. Like for the extent, ever since I redid the armature, my whole weapon draw, all the states. It's like, let me just let me just do some testing on the IK, just to just to see what kind of state it's in, like, is everything broken or are some things broken? And so because I kind of started looking into just like what's the state of my my whole IK setup ever since I had to rebuild the controller. And so usually what I do here, I had this previous system where on each weapon prefab there was this my old system relied on this class called weapon data, and that pretty much this monoscript here, it would be like a little factory that would allow you to have a bunch of functions in order to properly set like IK for the hands and the torso. So I kind of had to go in and review my system because it's been a while and I've mostly forgotten how it works. You know, like I had to go and review the underlying system. The good news is the underlying system functionality of how the IK system operates, the custom system, where it lerps these transforms from the torso to the hand on aiming. Like all that was pretty much intact. That wasn't really the problem. So I was doing some testing. Let's just play this here. And kind of seeing, you know, what's still working, what's broken, kind of seeing what the results were. And what I had done in anticipation, this, you know, I said to myself, well, if I ever have to do an armature, what really screws things up is the actual, if you look at these pistol handlers, these are one of the points where if you import your armature, you have to go in and add these points to the actual skeleton called pistol handler. These are the points where the gun is actually the root point where the gun is actually placed, connected to the right hand or the left hand if it's a dual pistol. And these had some sort of like rotation, and I wanted to zero these out. So if I ever had to reconstruct the controller, I could rely on that these positions will be 0 and that all the corresponding weapons related to that position would not be rotated as a child, you know, depending on whatever rotation is. So decided to zero those out, and for the most part, when I was testing, I found that for each state, the major problem was the actual gun position or the actual weapon offset. Now, what you're seeing here, I'll talk about this. Previously, in my old system, so it's kind of like I was seeing a lot of issues with the IK. Mostly, it looked like the actual the hand positions were intact, or mostly intact. It was kind of a mess, you know. Like I had to go in there and make sure and revalidate a bunch of states and stuff for sure. But I found that as I went along, like most of the data associated with, especially on the idle states, the non-aiming states, the actual data was still valid. All that needed to be corrected across the states was the actual placement of the weapon offset. Since the position of the handler rotation changed, it was always way off. But what I could do one and then copy over like a position for most of the states to use in it, and that fixed most of the problems. But the main issue was, it was not that the underlying system was like not functioning. You know, all that was great and good, but what was really going on is the actual way to set up the IK. So previously, I had these kind of the process to do it was actually a painful process, because I would have to start the app. I would have to go in and like either with a controller or with another component like player debug, I'd have to say equip. You know, I have to do this every time I wanted to test. I'd have to do like a couple steps in order to configure the state manually, and you do this over and over and over again, and then you'd have to go into each component. You have to go through this long list and find, okay, here's the pistol, because you can't mark it because it's instantiated, and it's just like the whole process. Like, I kind of took a step back and be like, you know what? Like, it's been a while since I implemented this, and when I did that, I got it to a system that was working. But now that I'm looking at it again, I've done so much more with like the enemy spawn controller. Like, I have a lot more abilities when it comes to, and this whole process, it could use a little bit of that, what I've done before, because this pistol, it was lacking a bunch of things. You could not visually see the actual location of these some of these points, like the points associated with the hands. Um, let's just see, or anything like that. You couldn't see the actual position. Like it'd just be like you'd have to go in and actually select and find and select the relative points to see. You couldn't see all of them represented at the same time in space by like these gizmos. And that was a really important thing to actually make sure and validate in real time, like when you're adjusting these, that you can see one in relation to the other. That's kind of a big thing. So I kind of sat back and be like, you know what, I could do a lot better than this. Like if I'm going to go and eventually um, have to redo all this IK and revalidate this IK. I want to make this process as painless as possible um, in the future. Like especially if it breaks again, because setting up the IK, while you could do it this way in this mono script with all these buttons, it was just like it was just an arduous task because one of the other things is like when you're testing out, you know, there's so I had to go in and like identify the three major components, you know, and kind of plan out like what needs to be everything that's related to the process of setting up the IK. There's so I had identified like there's selecting these individual points, moving them, and then writing to the SO data, and then there's also the aiming portion where you're trying to make sure when you transition to the aim animation that it transitions correctly from these torso points to the hand points. That's because the torso points are connected to like more of the spine root, so that allows like the equipping animations of the hands to go through. But you want to transition to the points of like the gun points when you're aiming, and that allows control of the aim rig to just affect the hands and not the whole torso. So it's kind of like a two-tiered system, like a custom setup that's required in order for me to have some sort of like aim rig look at control over the armature. And that was all designed previously, but that's the way the system works and it's functional. But the problem is like that second stage of lining up these points correctly, like that was kind of like a big mystery to me because I've forgotten like how to do that correctly. And so this kind of gave me a chance to like kind of review like my IK system and how I actually go and set that up. And then what deficiencies with the current system like that made the process very painstaking and not intuitive, right? So one of the things I identified was like there's a lot of these things where you have to go in because like each time you hit play, you have in the old system you'd have to go in and find this and select the right component and then scroll down through this long list. Like it just stacked up over and over time. So my whole goal was to kind of automate, expedite, and organize this whole process surrounding setting up a Weapon IK. So, and I said like, you know, the best way to do this is to have, now that I can do like editor IK, is to have an editor window that kind of brings everything together surrounding the whole process and makes it, you know, makes it really convenient. So I set up this window here that you can dock alongside, and you can dock alongside the inspector. And what it does for you, it allows you to move between these different tabs to see sort of like, you know, whatever you're kind of doing. Like previously when I was working with aiming, like I left myself like some vague notes on how to set up aiming in one of these one of these prefabs, and then in the and the actual weapon data, these mono buttons here, there was like a ton of these buttons that had these kind of names that didn't really mean anything to me. It didn't really like, it just said hit this button, hit that button, and then hope for the best. You know, it's like working blind. You know, it's like okay, I think that worked, but you can't really, know exactly what's going on, like, or know the exact process and have a good idea of that things are working correctly or why they work. Right. And the whole process of setting up aiming and then setting up shooting was kind of intermixed between the buttons, and it was just like, I describe it as a beautiful mess. Like, if you remembered how it worked, you could use it like that, but it's just really not the way to go. And one of the other problems with setting up aiming when I'm transitioning from like idle to aiming, um, like I couldn't see the actual. If you look at these, the aim rig weight and the right hand, you can see these sliders move in real time, um, like for aiming, and also you can see the current animation state switching around too, and that kind of tells you exactly, okay, you know we're on this particular animation controller state. We're on this particular, okay, we transitioned to aiming. Here's the previous one. And then in combination with the movement too, like, you know, the movement state. Okay, I'm running. Um, Now I'm stopped running it. And it kind of tells you the relevant animation state as well at a glance. You don't have to go into whatever it is and check in. Oh, it's down here in the animation controller. Where is it? Okay, I'm in. This is the preview. You don't have to hunt for these little components. It brings everything together, all the relevant information, so you're testing in real time in this window. So it brings everything related to setting up the IK in this one spot, so you're not juggling between all these different game objects to try to figure out if things are working, or you're not trying to like, okay, this is over here, and you know, so you can't really see, you can't really see the position, and you can only see one at a time. So, um, what this does for you, um, it really allows you to visualize all the different relevant points. So if you're in a different state, like let's just say, so here you can see every different point associated, and they're all different colored, and you can adjust. I really want to spend the time to add a lot of conveniences, and also like add like persistence too for these like settings. So um, instead of like manually equipping each time, what you can do if you just want to test the aiming state, like, or you don't want to test a particular weapon or not at all, you can set different options, and when the app reloads, it'll remember through persistence which one you set. So you don't have, it doesn't like reset each time. Same thing with the colors. You can fine tune the colors to which ones you wanna see. Just for example, auto aim lock. So when you have this window up, it'll know to auto equip the pistol, and then right after that on timing, once it's equipped, then it'll switch to the aiming state. So like a lot of conveniences to really, as much as possible, and then a lot of duplicate things where, like in the debug, it's like, oh, I just want to see the torso points, or I just want to see the hand points, or just get rid of the labels, or increase the gizmo size. So a lot of conveniences, and then making sure that each gizmo you can see the local rotation, and it's just like a really nice tool. Took the time to make it really nice, just so I can abstract away all the like the uncertainty and complexity and everything like that. So, and then the nice thing about these gizmos is that they're interactable. So, um, not in the aiming state, you can select these and they'll select the object, whatever, but you can't really manipulate them. And I made it safe so that the actual, if you're moving these things around, one of the nice things too is like, one of the other things, the other problems in the old system was that what you'd have to do manually, you'd have to go down to this list and you'd have to select the right key and you'd have to paste it into this field. And sometimes if you didn't follow these steps exactly, you'd have the wrong field in, and then you'd move these points around and you say, save these points, and it would write to a different state and screw something else up that you didn't intend to, and then you go test it and it would be wrong, and then something else would be broken. So the whole process was fallible, and there's too many steps that you could get wrong. For this though, this new system is great because it'll read um, what it'll do. Um, it'll read the animation state, and then through key relations, it'll know that it'll know exactly which, and it'll print out so you can validate if you're unsure which actual SO state it's editing, right? So it'll, by the actual animation, it'll interpret that, okay, we're going to be modifying the this actual SO data, and it'll modify it only for um, the actual relevant point. Now, so you're not seeing, like, every time I'd have to validate, I'd have to go through this whole. So if you look at the actual, like, the SO data, there's just a ton of stuff, and you can imagine like having a lot of these open. It's just this huge list, and there's a lot of useless information like options and stuff related to that particular state. We just want to see the relevant information, right? And that goes for like the particular state. So it's like when you're aiming, you want to know like hand IK position rotation, as well as the torso and the weapon opposite. That's relevant. But when you're in the let's just say idle state, the hand IK, that's not even relevant because you're not doing any aiming, so you don't even want to see that. The same thing, when you're editing, you're not going to be able to. It's not going to show gizmos for the hands because in this state you're not going to be editing the hands. So it really boils down to context, and it clears away all this redundant data that's open. You have to scroll. So it was really a mental tax before this old system, and now this new interface really cleans it up, and it really makes it painless. So, and I have like a lot of redundancy too, to where like not only do I have it on the debug where I can hide stuff, but when you're working and aiming also, you don't want to be switching tabs. Like, you could switch tabs, but I just made it easy on myself where you can just take this functionality and just pretty much repeat it here, right here. Same thing with common things related to the task of editing points. Like, you can go ahead and freeze the animator here, or so any sort of context of like just adjusting these aiming points, right? So when you select a point, usually it selects the object so you can see the object. That's great. What else do we have here? It selects the object or anything relevant to it, and usually you can go in here and switch between local and global. But the standard tools just give you one or the other. They give you the actual position change or the rotation. What I could do, and I wanted to do, is do something that allowed you to do both at the same time. So you have to be a little careful that you're not actually using the like, you want to be using these gizmos, but the gizmos will draw you position and rotation. So if you're on this correctly, what you can do is use both of them, or you can just switch between the two or none at all. Like, so if you just want to be working in uh, position changing, you can you can do that, or you can have both around at the same time. And so that's great. That's useful if, like, let's just say you're in this view. Um, you can't really grab these position handles when it's like that, you know. So you kind of want to just take away the rotation so you can get to it. But this actually reads from the global or local settings, so you can do you can switch around like that, like you would. Um, so all this development came at a cost, but like at this point, like in order to like simplify the process of setting up the IK, like for now, because I'm gonna have to do it again eventually anyways, and if it breaks again, I want a process that I can really, when I come back to it in 6 months, that I can really clearly get a handle on. Like, so my plan was having a ton of tool tips and really kind of clearly laying out what the process was for setting up different things. So I got this. So my system is like, you can edit these points, but it doesn't really edit these until you hit the green commit button. It won't write to the SO. So it writes these positions to scratch, but it won't commit to the SO unless you hit the green button, and then the SO state gets changed. So you can actually undo, and it'll write the SO values back to where it is, and that's great. And also, I put the undo functionality. So if you do one change and then two, you can just do step by step. So a lot of conveniences, a lot of great conveniences. And it really was needed for this whole process to really put the whole process in one window. So there's that point. So like on the idle state, you can, if the hands was off, or the weapon offset was off, you can just make those changes. And the next phase was going in and understanding like the aiming situation. Now this is the second part where it's like when you lock the aim, the big problem is the transition. It has to be smooth. Like before, I was having issues with like, it was always an issue I couldn't figure out with like the elbows snapping on the position. So when it changes, so now you can see the aim rig going, and then you can also see how it switches at the end from hand IK to the left, from the torso to the hand. And um, let's just see here. Okay, so I was talking about the I had a phone call. So I was talking about the next stage doing this transition. So I had issues before that I never really solved with. I could never get the elbow hint points aligned correctly. They would always snap suddenly, um, on the final transition. But here, you can really see the actual the points, how they align. And the real trick, I had to go and review and kind of look at my notes, like my vague notes, and I really kind of laid it out in clear test the actual setup, like how to do this correctly. And I kind of figured out, reminded myself, it really, in order to set up the aiming, you have to it really depends on um, getting the hand points to line up with the torso points, but the trick is that they do so when the IK is off, right? So you kind of have to like lock aim, freeze anim. So there's a whole bunch of steps, and then you want to commit that, and that's how you get the smooth transitions when you are doing the aim. So, and just had to make sure. And there's a whole process too, like, because what you have to do, it's really tricky too because I also my aim rig before, what it was happening, like I would have this set of this just two aim constraints, one on the hand to control the when you're firing, to control the actual accuracy of the how accurate the hand is to the actual aim point. But also the spine to make sure that when the aim target is rotating, it rotates the armature spine. Um, but the problem with that is that it would have to, it was like a general constraint, just two constraints for every gun and every state pretty much, and that wasn't really sufficient for. I had to have different constraints for each gun, and not only I found later, but different set of constraints um, for standing and crouching, because standing doesn't really apply to crouching when you're adding in the head. And so now I can more closely control the alignment of like pretty much the entire armature from the head to the hand, like when it comes to rotation, instead of just having one. So sometimes it would look a little off, especially when you're doing like corner aiming. So um, adding more constraints. So it's better, but you have to kind of manage the actual constraints per either standing or crouching. But anyways, um, that changed the system. Like what you had to do also is and these are all listed in the instructions, you kind of have to start when you're working on aiming from the scratch. You have to start with just the base pose. So you have to turn off the aim rig for the hand, and then once you got everything aligned, like step by step, like with the base pose position in relevance to the base, to the relative to the spine or relative to the aiming constraints, then you can finally go in and make sure that the hand alignment is aligned correctly to the target. And I put in these gizmos where you can um, aim rig, where you can actually make sure that, and also that the there is actually, you can actually see the alignment of the shot to the target. Like before, it was just like it had no debug lines to see. So I just made it clearly visual that you can see all that. So going back to the aiming, so that sets up the aiming, and then the next stage was setting up the shooting, which is this a whole nother thing where you want to make sure that so this red line represents the actual exact target of the projectile, and this is kind of like a whole nother process where you want to make sure, if you can get in here, you want to make sure that this, so the muzzle reference is local to the actual gun, and that moves with the gun, but the projectile spawn point is a world position. It can't be tied to the actual weapon once the shot is fired. It has to be tied to the world, and those points have to line up exactly. And the problem with this, like using Final IK, it's this weird thing where it's like you can't just use the muzzle reference position because it's affected. You can't just reference that transform directly and then spawn that point and then move it to world position, because for some reason, like if it's like a late update or whatever, I just can't. Yeah, like I had to come with a different solution to align these points, like with a coroutine, basically. Um, but getting these points to align is the tricky bit. There's a lot of I I had this algorithm, this mathematical algorithm that would, and this whole process that would do the trick, but I didn't really understand it. It was kind of like this hackery. I didn't understand it, so I had to kind of review how it worked. And the real trick came when you're capturing the actual points to align the points. You have to be specifically, the character has to be specifically rotated in the 0 position. Before I had it in over here in the 90-degree position, and what was happening is I would capture these points, but it would be, and as I rotated the character when shooting, these points would become misaligned mathematically. It would not be lining up. But when I do it in the 0 position, now when I actually turn the character, the actual points will remain in line with each other, and that's exactly what I want. So it took a little testing like before, but I got the system working better and cleaner. And I specifically stated here, the algorithm assumes that you're oriented to 0 in order for this to work. And then basically, once again, you have to go through, and it really depends on, to capture the position, you have to toggle the IK weight off and capture. You have to capture the no IK position and the IK position, and you calculate the difference. That delta has to be in relation to if you're at 0. If you capture the delta, the difference when you're at 90, that's a different delta. So if you're at 0, that's the reference point. And the real trick is the transform point, not around the muzzle, but actually around the character's transform. So if you translate the muzzle reference as the character rotates around locally, and you transform that to the from the delta as captured from a 0 reference point, that's how it all ties together. So there's some vector math, and there's a lot of, I mean, if you're confused about, how this works mathematically, yeah, it's just like me trying to wrap my head around it. But once I got this into this, this reliable, reproducible system, I'm pretty confident, like, if I follow these steps now, that it will operate properly. So it was just, this whole thing was just a chance to, like, kind of go and review how the system works, really iron it out, and really make it organized, easy to understand, and foolproofs, and really expedite the process of doing this without a lot of guesswork, without a lot of frustration. And I can kind of monitor this, everything that's happening relevant to setting up the IK from this whole interface. And so once I got the shooting all looking good, and it's just like, that's pretty much the whole picture. I have this actions tab here where you can go and equip different weapons and stuff, and then a little bit of, like, what you can also do you can also go in here, let's see, and you can take different states, and if you pop in different states, it'll say you can copy you can copy the weapon offset from one state to another, and you can copy the actual torso, or all of them, the points from one state to the other, to kind of work as a base reference. So you don't have to, for each state that's screwed up, especially for, like, common states, like, to fix most of the issues, I just had to start with the weapon offset, and that would fix most of the issues. But there's a little convenience function. You don't really need to copy over the hands placement for aiming, because the hands you're going to be doing that in the edit, I think. I may need to do that for like just to have so the hands aren't totally screwed up. But for most of the aiming, I've realized that most of the aiming for most of the states is already completely broken, and it'll have to be in the end it'll all have to be revalidated. But that's kind of where I stopped myself. Like I needed a system where it was more easy to fix and understand how to fix this. You know, the next time I come back to it, but also once I got like most of the states working for um yeah, my goal was to just as a foundation is to get the equipping all the basic states working for the pistol again. um you know, so everything, basically everything except cover, like, so my plan is to actually support and revalidate um the cover stuff when I get to the level 1 gameplay testing to make sure that's fixed up. But for right now, I just wanted to make sure that I had one, just as a proof of concept, that I had this new system fix up one one weapon, which is the base starting weapon, the pistol, for all of the basic states like equip, idle, aiming, running, and then also make sure that um, aiming, crouching works again too. So, and my plan is to like only fix the weapons as they're required for the actual level. So I'm not going to fix the rifle because that's not required until level 2, but the pistol is, you know. And then when I come to level 1 gameplay testing, I will go ahead and take the next step of fixing the actual cover functionality once again for that. So I don't have to do all the work of fixing every state for every weapon again, but just make sure that right for now that the actual basic functionality, IK functionality is working for all these basic states for the pistol. So that's what I accomplished today. So yeah, I didn't get into there's a whole separate thing with like dual weapons. There's a whole like and that when it comes to supporting dual weapons, whenever I get the first dual weapon, I will add to this Windows functionality, and that's the whole point of this. Like this is a clean interface where I can actually, if I wanted to support dual weapons, I can actually implement more functionality in order to support that kind of stuff or whatever is needed. Like maybe like for weapon or for melee weapons, I don't really need aiming or shooting, you know, and I can kind of detect that. So it's a really nice kind of thing, and it all hooks in nicely on play, and it knows that it's not going to show UI when it's not playing, but in certain things like actions, it'll give you stuff even if it's not playing, and it'll know how to change stuff, or like this will show. So it knows the context, and it's very intuitive, and it was all worth it to build. But like it really helps to demystify and remove all the complications, and this is really how it should be. Um, it gives you all the relevant information, and you can see gizmos and interactable gizmos um, as you need to see them. There's no more guesswork. There's no more. You can see clearly, and anything that needs to be added, like it's all about convenience. Um, like yeah, just like having relevant information. You know, where's the muzzle point? Is it aligning? You know, before you couldn't see any of this. You'd have to go and visually check and scan down. Okay, here's the main projectile. Oh, here's the muzzle reference, and you know these would get collapsed. It was a big pain in the butt, but now it's like anything else that needs to be. One of the things, yeah, it's like I have to turn this on every time, but you know, so it's mostly there, but a lot of these things are persistent. They're hooked in directly. Like if I need to debug the actual process, I can actually click this button and it'll report in the actual console what's going on as far as the actual IK lerping and all that. And that's great because I don't have to go in. It prevents me from having to go in and find, if I want to turn on the debug lines every time I have to go and find where is okay, it's over here. It's where is it? Okay, it's right here. Okay, yeah, and I don't have to remember where it is. It all hooks in and it's all right here. So, and that's the whole thing of like convenience, intuitive, all that kind of stuff. So really wrangling this process, and then you can see you can actually see the relevant point data. So anything else that becomes apparent to this whole process of setting up IK that would be nice to have, that should be there. That just makes my life easier when setting up this IK. I can actually improve upon this, but I got this to a place where I fit the main goals of editing points, setting up aiming, and then setting up shooting, all in their different respective tags. And then you can have your different actions, and I can actually, if I didn't want to switch tabs, I could actually put these actions, duplicate these actions down here just for convenience, and it's all possible here, and you don't have to screw around anymore with the actual the monoscript, the weapon monoscript. So that's the way it should be, and that's what I really spent most of the week working on. And I got this to a place where it's like, okay, I got this fixed up. It's looking great. Did a bunch of testing. On Friday, there was a little bit of something with the jumping state. Like when I was doing cartwheels, the head was kind of snapping back a little bit. But I just had to go in and adjust the lerp timing just a little bit, and that fixed the issue. And it pretty much brought me back to... So that, like on Thursday, I finished up my new IK editor system thing, and I think it was completely worth it. So now I have a real tool in order to really make the process of fixing IK or doing anything like really painless, really seamless and intuitive. So a sidetrack week, but it was something that needed to be taken care of, because the whole process, while functional, it was not the best. But now it's looking pretty good. So that left me like with Friday. I kind of got back to my original before I was sidetracked, setting up the Ragdoll. So I went back to those videos and looked at the documentation. After I kind of reviewed the rest of them, and I kind of went to the beginning of the video and did a step-by-step process of setting up the rig builder ragdoll animation. And this was a whole thing of trying to figure out, like, whenever you're new to a package, like trying to figure out how to configure and set up correctly the right thing. So I had to go in and make sure that all this configuration was set up, and you kind of have to go in and make sure. Let's see if I can. Yeah, you kind of have to make sure that all these colliders that it's going to set up for you are aligned correctly, the armature. And there's a whole process that I had to kind of figure out and go through the videos and make sure everything's working good. And you kind of have to set up an additional layer and set up, all these reference fields. But for the most part, I had it working pretty good. There was something with the tail that I was trying to, but I was testing out like just the basic, like how do you do a fall animation? Like, and basically, I got it to where you can just enable the ragdoll animator, and whatever setting it's on, which is falling, it'll actually it'll apply the ragdoll, and it'll do a nice falling animation. or a nice, like a nice. The key here is um, the key here is I think it's yeah, muscles power, and if you decrease this to 0, then like the actual spring value between the muscles, it pretty much makes the body go limp, and that's how you do a good ragdoll. And like if I was to do a ragdoll out of the box on my own, it would look very basic. This system really makes I got it really looking pretty nice because it applies a bunch of physics settings to each limb, so it looks very natural instead of like my own setup where it'd be like kind of, yeah, it would be ragdoll, but it would look like a, it wouldn't look very good. So I got this looking pretty good, and then there's this extra thing that allows you to um, uh, you can actually start off at a muscles power like down here, so it's sort of semi limp, but then it kind of lerps all the way down to 0, so where you're completely limp. So that's the best result. But I needed to go in and figure out how to subclass this one in order to like have one more extra step, so that kind of says, okay, so I can actually successfully reset the values. Because let's just say like I died and reloaded again, and then I tried to do a ragdoll again. Well, it would just be, it's still the component would still be at 0%. I needed a way to keep the muscles power but set it back to overall 100%. It affects the actual muscle multiplier, so I needed to reset the multiplier back to 1 when the component is disabled, and I was able to do that with a subclass. You have to set up an asset, but I was able to figure out how to get that working. But that was all cool, and I was ready to go. I was starting to hook up the logic and the timing, in order to apply that and demo that this week. Like a ragdoll and then a fade to black reload. Well, something went wrong, and something went really wrong, and it kind of left it kind of left it kind of left the end of the week on a sour note, um, because what's happening, as you can probably, so take a look at this. You have this big gizmo list, right? And this is where you can turn on and off things like colliders. And this is necessary. Sometimes you want to see, your capsule collider, or you don't want to see it. You want to be able to hide these things. Well, something went wrong with my project where all of a sudden I noticed this blue line around here, and I noticed other gizmos, that I didn't turn on. They just appeared, and it's like, what the heck? What's going on here? So, and also my project, I had done all this work setting up the armature and all that, and more work, probably 4 hours worth of work. Most of the work was just, figuring out and testing how to set this up. So not too much work, but all of a sudden I wanted to go save my checkpoint, and then Unity version control was just gone. There's no project changes. It's like, okay, what the heck's going on here? So that might have been a separate issue, but the main issue was that, I'll show you what happens now. So I put in this ragdoll animator component, and let's just say I'm working and I do a recompile, a reload domain. So we'll just reload here. What happens is this component in particular, I thought it was because I was doing some like assembly definition reference, or assembly definition, and I thought that was what was causing the issue. But I needed an assembly definition in order to actually reference the component and tell it to turn on and off from my how I usually do. But so that wasn't really the problem. The problem is this component. I don't know if it's a 6.4 thing or what, but now as you can see, this it went and turned on a bunch of these gizmos, right? And it's like, you know, it turned on the canvas gizmo. It just turned on a bunch of stuff, and it's just like, what the heck's going on? Oh, okay, so okay, well, that's weird. Let's just go turn off these gizmos. So you go down here to where the let's just say the sphere. You want to turn off the sphere collider, and you type in sphere. Well, it's missing now. You know, box collider, it's not there. It's like there's no entry, and it's just like you can't turn it off unless you turn off all the gizmos, right? And that's a big problem too, because it's like, you know, I don't want to be seeing all these other gizmos. I want to be, you know, if they lose control of my gizmos, that's a big problem. I can't have that. If I remove the component and recompile, the problem fixes itself. So at the end of the day, I was kind of like, oh, what the heck, you know, like, because I had this this ragdoll set up looking good, and it's just like, this is the system I want to use, but if it breaks my gizmos, it's, you know, what can I do? So I was kind of, you know, it left me on a sour note. Like, I couldn't demo this week because I didn't have too much to demo except this IK system. I don't think people will be too interested in that, but yeah, it's just doing IK shooting again, you know, basically what I've done already. But um, you know, I can't really, you know, so I spent the rest of the time like diving into, like, maybe it's a quick fix. Maybe I can go into their component and, like, you know, test around, comment this out, comment that out. But there's a whole system behind this component when I was diving into their code, and it's just like, it wasn't supposed to be this way. It wasn't. I was supposed to buy this. It's supposed to expedite making my own, not me diving into, you know, their damn implementation files to figure out, you know, why this is happening, you know. So they have some sort of, like, you know, I spent spent a while trying to, like, just trying to find a quick fix, but it was just like this huge system, not a huge system, but like this system of complexity where it's like, I have no idea what is causing my gizmos to break here. And at the end of the day, like, the only thing I gotta do is send them a message on Discord and say, hey, this is no good, you know. And it's just like, kind of thinking about, like, what can I do? Like, you know, do I not use this ragdoll thing, or, you know, do I, because I can't have this going on. Like, in order to, I need my, I need my gizmos control. I can't have this. And I was trying to, like, a bunch of, like, stuff, like, maybe if I disable the gizmo and reload, maybe it's like, if it is in the scene and applied to a game object, it is going to do this, right? And the only way is to remove it. So I think after the fact, I kind of came up with the decision. I was like, okay, ragdolling at this point is a polish. It's just like, right, it's a polish feature. It needs to be included in the production build, just like the IK for all the states. You know, when you're putting out a production demo or whatever, that has to be there. But in the interim, what I can do, if it's purely like a polish thing, you know, used for when the snake grabs you and kills you, then what you can do is, if you're putting out a demo for presentation, you can have that for that one thing. You can set up the component and all its dependencies, and then what you can do, you can set it up, you can test it, see that it works, but then you can shelve it until the time comes where it's needed to be applied for, if you're doing a production build or a demo or just making a video or whatever. Then you can, as part of one of those things that needs to be there. It doesn't have to be there at all times, right? And I'm a little concerned that the other packages from this person will have the same effect, like the tail animator, but I have to see if that's true when I get to it. But right now, but the thing is, for the snake doesn't have to be there all the time, right? The character does, because he's gonna be in all the scenes. So that's the plan for now. It's one of those things. It's like, and it's another thing where it's like it kind of as a policy. I think going forward, like instead of being on the latest and greatest, like 6.4, like going from 6.2 to 6.4, what you want to do is always be one full version behind the. Uh, so if you're gonna move to 6.6, you need to go to 6.5, right? That way, all the third-party stuff can actually catch up and have been supported for a good long time. Um, because especially the 6.4, like this 6.4 move, like I had so many of these third-party packages where a lot of stuff was just broken, and it's just like, so I think it's just another one of these things where, the developer makes regular changes to this package. Last one was March and it's May. So if I put, I went on Discord and notified him of the bug, and you know, it's one of those things that has to be ready when the game is in production. But if I have it set up and tested, I can actually shelve it and then make sure that I bring it back. And by that time, if I when I need to bring it back, by that time, hopefully the issue with the gizmos is fixed. Because I can't continue development when my gizmos are corrupted. And unfortunately, Unity doesn't give you any way to like read off these gizmos and make your own editor in order to turn these on and off. Like I tried that route, but it's just there's something. And then I'm not going to go in and to their system and try to figure out how the heck they're breaking my gizmos. It's just that's. Sometimes it's okay. Like I can spend like if sometimes I've done that like with the I actually took the time to like because it was like a direct error. Like if it's an easy one, like I can go in and fix that error and then get my functionality back without the developer having to make a fix, waiting for them to make a fix. But this one, it's like there's a whole damn editor system behind it, and I have no idea where it's going wrong. So it's like, and I paid for the package, and I'm not going to go and fix and debug their package. That's not, I spent money to like expedite this process, not to go and fix, third-party packages. So it's just, yeah, this case it's too much, and it has to be shelved. Otherwise, if I get to the end of the line and it's still not fixed when I need it to be, then I'll go with a different solution. I'll do another Ragdoll solution or whatever I need to do. But for right now, it's just a presentation thing, and we'll get it working, for a demo video. But then it's gonna be, we'll save it as a prefab, all the configuration and stuff. But it'll be not there when we're so we can move on, have that, but it's not gonna be breaking our gizmos. So that is pretty much all I have to say. Yeah, mostly this week was working on revisiting the IK stuff, making a better system in order to make the process as intuitive and painless as possible. And then and then this getting back to the Ragdoll stuff. So I should be good to go. Now that I figured out the Ragdoll for next week, I should set up the Ragdoll, and it should be like now I should finally, that I have a grasp and a confidence of this IK stuff, that I can fix it. And I do have a solid process of fixing the IK stuff. Now that I can focus back on the HK stuff, and it's going to be good with the Ragdoll. That's already there. It's going to be all about the next week is going to be all about the tail, fixing up the animations, and then making sure the tail animator is working, the procedural animations, and then the real meat and potatoes, I think, which will be the actual snake's patrol process of how it stalks you. Finally getting to that, after being sidetracked. But that's what we're looking forward to next week. Finally getting to wrapping up the HK prototype with no more further delays or side tracks, side routes, other things I need to, no more distractions, right? So that's the plan for next week and finally get around to that. So that's all for this week. It was a productive week. It didn't really feel like I was redoing work because I didn't really redo work, but actually figuring out a better system to be able to do that work as needed. So it's a good compromise, I think. Um, and we will take it from here next week. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you next time.